I always thought death would be quiet. I didn't expect it to wake me up in her bed. The sheets smelled like jasmine and guilt. My eyes snapped open to sunlight pouring through glass walls, flooding a room too elegant to feel real. Cream-colored drapes swayed in a breeze I couldn't feel. Everything gleamed. Marble floors, gold-trimmed furniture, a vanity that looked like it belonged in a palace, and a floor-length mirror propped casually by the window. I didn't recognize any of it. My heart pounded. I sat up too quickly. Silk clung to my skin, unfamiliar and too soft. I looked down at my hands. Slim. Pale. A tiny gold ring on my finger that wasn't mine. What the hell? My voice came out wrong. Too smooth. Too poised. I scrambled out of bed, bare feet touching ice-cold marble, and rushed to the mirror. What stared back wasn't me. Glossy dark hair in elegant waves. Cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. Eyes so light they were almost silver. Lips painted a subtle nude pink, the kind of color I never wore. The woman in the mirror tilted her head when I did. Blinked when I blinked. "No," I whispered, voice shaking. "No, no, no." A soft knock at the door startled me. I spun around just as the door opened. A young woman in a black uniform stepped inside, not even blinking at my panic. "Good morning, Madame Sophia," she said calmly. "Shall I bring your tea now?" Sophia. No, that couldn't be. My stomach flipped. I backed away from the mirror, my breath shallow. I knew that name. I knew her. Sophia Van Kress. The woman who ruined my life. The woman who exposed fake scandals about me to destroy my reputation, who seduced my fiancé, trashed my career, and made sure every door I'd ever opened stayed locked forever. The woman who killed me. I died because of her. Because I believed in people. Because I thought love was enough. And now I was her? The maid blinked at me. "Madame?" I opened my mouth but no words came. Just a wave of nausea. I stumbled back onto the bed. This had to be a dream. A nightmare. Some twisted purgatory. Before I could speak again, another knock. Firmer, colder. "Enter," the maid said without looking back. The temperature in the room dropped a full 10 degrees when he walked in. He was tall. Tall enough to tower over the bed even from where I sat. Dark suit, perfectly tailored. Sharp jaw, neatly combed chestnut brown hair. And those eyes. I had dreamed of those eyes once. Now they looked through me. "Morning," he said. No warmth. Just assessment. My throat clenched. "Good morning," I forced out. He narrowed his eyes. "You're awake late." His voice was calm, but the accusation was there. Subtle, polished, like everything about him. I didn't know whether to cry or run. This was Evan Van Kress, Sophia's husband. My Evan. Or at least he had been once, before he vanished from my life and reappeared on the arm of the woman who destroyed me. And now? He was looking at me with that same unreadable expression. "You don't usually sleep in," he said, his gaze scanning my face like a lie detector. "Are you feeling well? Say something, Jay. Say anything." "I just didn't sleep well," I murmured, praying my voice didn't crack. "Strange dreams." He nodded once. "Let me know if it becomes a pattern." And just like that, he turned and walked out of the room. Gone. No kiss, no touch, no concern, just silence. The maid bowed slightly. "Your breakfast will be ready shortly, madame." She turned to leave. I barely managed a nod, then collapsed back into the pillows. Tears stung my eyes. What the hell was happening? I didn't believe in reincarnation. I didn't believe in second chances. But this wasn't life. It wasn't death, either. It was punishment, and it had her face. That night, I dreamed of the mirror. But not the one in the room. No, this one was older, familiar, cracked down the middle, and stuffed in the attic of the house I grew up in. The mirror from my childhood. It stood crooked, surrounded by boxes of forgotten things. Only this time, it wasn't broken. Not entirely. Just fractured. One shard glowed faintly, like fire caught in glass. I reached toward it and it pulsed, warm and humming. And then I heard her voice. My voice. Soft. Hurt. Scared. "Please," I whispered in the dream. "Just let me wake up as me again." The mirror shimmered once. And then darkness. Her lipstick tastes like lies. The first time I looked into the antique mirror in the bathroom, I half expected it to crack from the strain. I leaned in slowly, studying the face I was now wearing. Perfectly shaped brows. A small mole near the corner of the mouth. The faintest smirk tugging at lips I didn't trust, not even on my own reflection. I reached up and touched them. The lipstick tasted like lies. Bitter and expensive. This wasn't me. But today, I had to be her. The dining room was glass-walled, 25 stories up, sunlight spilling across a long marble table set for one. Apparently, Evan preferred to eat alone. Or with his silence. A silver cloche waited in front of me. The butler removed it with a practiced flourish, revealing an omelette so symmetrical it looked printed. Next came a cup of cappuccino, rich foam sprinkled with something sweet. I reached for the cup out of habit, then paused. A thick scent of vanilla hit me like a slap. Too strong. Too sweet. Sophia liked her cappuccino with vanilla syrup. Jay, hated it. But it was too late. The butler was watching. The maid was watching. There were eyes everywhere in this glass box of a house. So I took a sip, and nearly gagged. I set it down quickly, forcing a swallow and a smile. Delicious, I lied, like a coward. A flicker of movement at the doorway made me freeze. She was younger than I remembered. Lena. Sophia's half-sister, if I recalled correctly. Mid-20s, soft features framed by wavy chestnut hair. She wore a pale yellow blouse and a leather-bound sketchbook hugged to her chest. Something about her felt untouched, too genuine for this house. "Sophie," she said, stepping into the room with a careful smile. "Didn't know you were eating downstairs." I blinked. "Neither did I muttered under my breath, then cleared my throat. I just felt like joining the morning light. Smooth, real smooth. Lena pulled out a chair and sat across from me, flipping her sketchbook open to a half-finished portrait of some flowers in charcoal. Her eyes flicked up to mine, then stayed there just a little too long. "You okay?" she asked, softly. "You look different." I gripped the edge of the chair. "Just tired." She tilted her head. "You're not wearing your usual red." I looked down at the beige blouse I had chosen instinctively. Plain, soft, definitely not Sophia's usual statement style. "I guess I felt like something quieter," I said. "People change." Her brow lifted slightly, but she smiled. "Maybe they do." The silence stretched. Then a new presence entered the room. Colder, heavier. Evan. He didn't say a word. He simply walked to the coffee station, poured himself a black espresso, and leaned against the marble counter. "Did you run out of vanilla?" he asked without looking at anyone. My stomach turned. "No," I said too fast. "I just wanted to try something new." He looked up, eyes meeting mine across the room. "Cool. Calculating. I see." He didn't say anything else, but he didn't need to. He knew. Later that day, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at the antique mirror again. It had probably been bought at auction. Gold leafing around the edges. Little roses carved into the corners. It didn't fit with the house's sleek design. It felt like it didn't belong. Just like me. I touched the glass gently. "Why her?" I whispered. "Why this face?" The mirror didn't answer, but I could feel something behind it, like the pulse of a memory I hadn't lived yet. That evening, the air turned colder. Dinner was at the Van Kress family estate. A sprawling mansion on the edge of the city, all marble pillars and sharp shadows. I was driven there in a town car with tinted windows, escorted like royalty and feeling like a prisoner. The dining hall was enormous. 10 chairs lined each side of the table, though only 3 were occupied. Me, Evan, and the woman at the head of the table. Eloise Van Kress. I remembered her face from headlines. Ice blonde, razor-cheeked, pearls too perfect to be real. She had built her legacy on mergers, scandals, and backroom deals, and raised her daughters the same way. "Late," she said as I walked in. Not angry, just disappointed. Like I'd missed a cue in a play she'd written. "I had to change," I offered. She looked me over once. Clearly, Evan sat to her left, arms crossed. I took my place opposite him. The meal began in silence. Silverware clinked gently. Wine glasses caught the chandelier light. It would have been beautiful if it weren't so suffocating. "So," Eloise said finally, dabbing her lips with a napkin, I hear you've been experimenting with your look. I froze. Is that a problem? Only if it becomes confusing, she said flatly. The board prefers consistency. Our name thrives on it. Our name, I repeated quietly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You do remember whose name you married into, don't you, Sophia? I wanted to scream, to throw my glass, but I only smiled back. I remember. Evan's eyes were on me the entire time. Not mocking, not amused. Studying. Back at the penthouse, I tore off the pearls I never asked to wear and stood in front of the mirror again. I stared at the woman in the reflection. She looked so composed, so perfect, so fake. And yet, her eyes looked tired. Not just mine, hers. Maybe she had been tired for a long time. Is that why you ruined me? I whispered. Because you didn't know how to save yourself? The silence wrapped around me, and for the first time I wondered, maybe Sophia hadn't been a villain. Maybe she'd just been drowning, and now it was my turn to swim in her storm. The woman I hated had more scars than I imagined, and none of them were visible. The library wasn't on any of the house's digital blueprints. I found it behind a mirrored door on the 3rd floor, tucked between a guest suite and a linen closet. A narrow staircase led to it, winding like a secret. Dust hung in the air like the breath of things forgotten. The room itself was stunning, dark mahogany shelves lined with leather-bound books, a reading nook pressed against arched windows, and a ladder on wheels that creaked like it hadn't moved in years. This wasn't a room meant for guests. It was hers. Sophia's scent still lingered faintly, jasmine, ink, and something colder underneath. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe I just wanted proof that she was real, that she had a past, that she wasn't just the villain in my story. What I found instead was her truth. A set of notebooks was wedged behind a row of philosophy books, moleskin covers, no titles, just ink-stained edges and a black leather strap holding them shut. I took the top one, opened it carefully, and froze. The handwriting was fluid and precise, elegant, cold. The first entry was dated 10 years ago. Mother says kindness is a vulnerability, that people only respond to power. I smiled at a girl in class today and was told to stop. You want to lead? She asked. Then don't kneel to be liked. My fingers trembled. I turned the page. He kissed me today. Evan. Softly at first. I waited for the flutter. It never came. Mother warned me. Love is optional. Legacy is not. I sat on the floor, the notebook open on my knees, and read entry after entry. Year after year, each one more hollow than the last. She hadn't been happy. She hadn't even known how. By the 5th notebook, I found something I hadn't expected. A drawing. It was small and rough. Charcoal pencil on the back of a page. A girl sitting on the floor with her head buried in her knees. Alone. No face. Just darkness around her. I recognized that position. I had once curled into myself the same way, when my life fell apart. Maybe she did too. That night, I locked the bathroom door and let myself cry for the first time since waking up in her skin. It came out quietly at first, just tears sliding down unfamiliar cheeks. Then louder, guttural, ugly. I pressed my forehead against the cold sink, breath hitching. My reflection stared back, wide-eyed and trembling. Her eyes, my grief. I hated you, I whispered. I hated you. And for the first time, I didn't know who I meant anymore. The next morning, the house went quiet just before she arrived. Mira. Her heels clicked against marble like warning bells. She stepped into the living room like she owned it, tall, sleek, dressed in a fitted black dress that clung like a second skin. Her lipstick was blood red. Her smile, all teeth. Darling, she purred, striding toward me. You look almost human. I stood up instinctively. Did we have plans? Not anymore, she said smoothly, running her fingers along the edge of the couch as she sat down without invitation. But you've been avoiding me. That's rude. I kept my voice even. I've been busy. Her brows lifted. With Evan? Her tone turned syrupy. I'd be careful. He's good at pretending things are fine. Until he decides you're not worth the performance. I stared at her. Are you here for something specific? Mira leaned back, crossing her legs. You're not usually this hostile. You used to bite in quieter ways. I'm not in the mood for games. She laughed, low, amused, predatory. That's a shame. You were always so good at them. I didn't answer. I couldn't afford to. Her eyes sharpened. You do remember what's at stake here, don't you? I tilted my head. Why don't you remind me? She smiled, slow and cruel. Darling, if you try to change the rules now, I won't hesitate to use what I have. You know exactly what I mean. And then she was gone. Just like that. A storm in heels, leaving tension in her wake. I waited until I knew Evan was in his office before slipping into Sophia's private study. The air was colder here. Not temperature, presence. The walls were dark wood. The desk massive and heavy. Everything was too orderly. Too still. It took 20 minutes to figure out the safe was behind the painting. Another 10 to guess the code, her birth date. Inside were a few documents, some old photographs, and a flash drive. I plugged it into her tablet with shaking hands. Files, labeled. Neat. Ndiak Mira. Board manipulation. J.Dawson, _reputation.pdf. My name. I clicked it open. Dozens of emails, messages, altered photos. Evidence of how she, or someone, had destroyed me. My stomach dropped. Some of it had Evan's initials, but none of it came from him directly. At the bottom, a note in Sophia's handwriting. She didn't deserve it. I just couldn't stop. I wanted to win. Even if it meant killing something good. That night, the mirror came again. Only this time, it was different. In the dream, the mirror stood whole for a moment, then cracked once more. A scene played inside the shards, a boardroom, a handshake, a smug editor taking money. My name on a headline that ended my career. I saw Sophia's hand, steady, cold, sliding the envelope across the table. And I saw her look away, not triumphant, ashamed. The next morning, Evan looked at me a little too long when I laughed at something Lena said at breakfast. Not suspicious, not angry. Just curious. I caught the edge of a smile in his eyes before he looked away. And something inside me ached. The woman I hated had more scars than I imagined. And now I had to carry them. Loving him once almost killed me. Loving him again might finish the job. Evan wasn't the kind of man who opened doors, literal or metaphorical. He moved like someone who had spent years mastering silence, until it bent to his will. But in the last few days, something in that silence had shifted. A hesitation, a question, and, maybe, a memory. It started with a book. I was curled up on the velvet chaise in Sophia's sunroom, pretending to read. The cover was an old novel I remembered from college, The Winter Between Us. Poetic, slow, tragic. A favorite of mine, not Sophia's. Evan passed by the open doorway, then doubled back. "You're reading that?" he asked. I looked up. "You know it?" He stepped inside. His expression didn't change, but I noticed the way he kept his hands in his pockets, a quiet kind of restraint. I read it in law school. It stayed with me longer than I expected. I closed the book softly. Because it ends badly? He studied me. Because it felt honest. There was a long beat of quiet. Then, out of nowhere, I heard myself say, "I saw an old interview of yours last night." He tilted his head. "Which one?" I forced a smile. "The one where you talked about justice being personal. About how some people mistake cruelty for strength." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That was a long time ago. You seem different," I said gently. "Less guarded." I was. A pause. "You remember it well." I shrugged, masking the lump in my throat. It stuck with me. He didn't answer, but something flickered in his eyes before he nodded and left the room. That evening, we stood together on the rooftop terrace. The city glowed below us in golden threads, buildings like teeth lit up against the dark. The air was cool, not cold enough for a jacket, but enough to bring goosebumps to my arms. "I've never liked this view," he said quietly. I turned to him surprised. "Why not?" "It's too perfect. Like the city's lying to you." I smiled. "I like the idea of a place pretending to be more beautiful than it is. At least it's trying." He actually chuckled, just once, and looked down at his glass. I felt it before I noticed it, his hand brushing against mine on the balcony rail. It was barely a touch, but the skin on my fingers flared to life like fire. He didn't move for a moment. Then he pulled back, not abruptly, but with intention. Like he was afraid of something too big to name. I stood there, trembling in a body that didn't belong to me, with a heart that still did. Lena found me later in the hallway. She was holding a tray of tea, her fingers curled tightly around the edges. "You're different lately," she said. I raised a brow. "In a bad way?" She shook her head. "No, just quieter, softer." She paused, then added, "Almost like someone who's finally breathing." My throat went dry. She smiled gently. "I like it, for what it's worth. I always thought you were pretending before." Maybe I was. That night, we attended a charity gala hosted by the Van Kress Foundation, one of those events where everyone smiles too much and means none of it. I wore a deep blue dress with an open back, not something I would have chosen as Jay, but somehow it felt right. Powerful, but not sharp. Evan stood beside me as we stepped into the press corridor. Flashes exploded like lightning. Reporters called out questions. "Mrs. Van Kress, any comment on the recent board rumors? Is it true you're stepping back from public appearances?" Before I could speak, or panic, one reporter shouted, "Is it true your marriage is just for show?" I froze. Then Evan stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on my back. He looked the reporter dead in the eye and said, "You don't get to ask that." The air went still. He didn't raise his voice, but somehow it was the loudest thing in the room. And for the first time in years, I felt safe. That night, the mirror came again. Only this time, it wasn't in a dream. It was on the shore of the lake where Evan and I, the real me, Jay, had once gone for a weekend retreat, back when we were younger. Before the scandals. Before Sophia. Before everything shattered. The air in the dream smelled like pine and summer. He sat beside me on the dock, legs dangling over the edge. "I'm in love with you," he said. And I believed him, until the dream changed. The lake turned black. The sun vanished. The dock cracked beneath me. I fell into cold, dark water, and as I sank, I heard my name on his lips. Jay. But it wasn't a rescue. It was a goodbye. I woke up with tears on my face and a storm in my chest. Loving him once had almost killed me. Loving him again might finish the job. And still, I couldn't stop. Some truths don't set you free. They just burn the cage down. The envelope arrived without a name. Just my initials, SVK, printed in neat typewritten font on the front. I found it tucked between my morning mail, art gallery invitations, stock reports, a luxury skincare promotion. It looked harmless. It wasn't. Inside were photographs. 10 of them. High resolution. Professionally framed. Me, or rather, Sophia, walking hand in hand with Lena through the hospital wing. Sitting too close to Evan on the garden bench. Smiling. Really smiling, as if I had nothing to hide. And at the bottom, a single typed line. "She's not who she says she is." I didn't need a signature to know it was from Mira. By noon, the rumors had already started. The house staff whispered more than usual. Phone calls stopped when I entered a room. Lena looked worried but didn't ask. Evan stayed late at work, or maybe he just stayed away. I knew what Mira was doing. Not just watching, positioning. She wanted me cornered. And Eloise? She didn't need a reason to pounce, just a pretext. I didn't have long. I left the house that night dressed like Sophia. Black coat, sunglasses, hair twisted up like a shield. My name got me past the receptionist at a private security firm that handled, let's just say, delicate affairs. I asked to see the files on a woman named Mira Grayson. The man behind the desk raised a brow. "You're not supposed to know we keep those." "I'm not supposed to know a lot of things," I replied coldly. And yet here we are. He didn't smile. But 10 minutes later, he handed me a file. It was thick. Inside, signed NDAs, travel logs, transaction records. She'd been paid through offshore accounts, funneled through shell companies tied loosely to Sophia's businesses. But that wasn't the worst of it. One document was a heavily redacted report detailing psychological evaluations. Sophia's. And Mira's name appeared more than once under external influencer. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. Mira had manipulated her. No. Mira had controlled her, and Sophia had let her, because it was easier than being alone. Back at the penthouse, I went straight to the room with the mirror. It glowed now, not just in my dreams, in reality. Soft pulses of pale light shimmered across the cracks like breath trapped in glass. I stood before it and touched the surface. It was cold, then suddenly, warm. My reflection flickered, and I saw her. Not me. Her. Sophia. She stood in the same place, in the same robe. Her face wasn't angry. It wasn't smug or sharp. She was crying. I wanted to fix it, she whispered. But I didn't know how. Behind her, the night she died, her bedroom, the shattered lamp, the pills spilled on the floor. The voicemail from Mira. If you're not going to handle her, I will. The mirror trembled. The next morning, Eloise summoned me. No invitation, no explanation, just a summons, like a queen calling a pawn back to heel. Her office was colder than I remembered. All marble and mahogany, with a view of the city that made people look like insects. She didn't greet me, didn't smile, just pointed to a chair. I hear you've been struggling, she said finally. I crossed my legs slowly. Struggling how? Her eyes narrowed. Erratic behavior, unscheduled visits to undesirable locations. And now, photographs? She slid them across the table like evidence in court. I didn't blink. They're real. But they don't prove anything. They prove enough, she snapped. You've gone soft. You're letting that child, she meant Lena, fill your head with weakness. You've stopped thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than ever, I said. Eloise stood, looming. You are not the woman I groomed. You are not the wife this family needs. I stood too. Maybe I never was. Her lip curled. I can have you declared medically unstable within 48 hours. You'll disappear, and no one will question it. You tried that already, I said quietly. When I was 6. When I cried too much at school and made your brand look weak. For the first time, she flinched. And I smiled. Small, but real. I remember everything now. I left the office without another word. And for the first time, Eloise didn't stop me. Evan found me in the library later that evening. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching me leaf through one of Sophia's old notebooks. You don't lie as well as you used to, he said softly. I looked up. Is that a compliment? He walked in slowly. You used to lie for power. Now, it feels like you're lying to protect something. Maybe I am. He stopped a few feet away. Or someone. I closed the notebook. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've paid for them. But there are things in motion now that started before either of us could stop them. He studied me. You're not the same. I exhaled. Would you believe me if I told you I never was? There was silence. Then he said something I didn't expect. I wanted to believe you. That night, I sat by the mirror. No dream this time. Just me. The glass glowed softly, humming like a heartbeat. The cracks were almost gone. One last piece, somewhere inside me, still missing. But I knew this much. Sophia hadn't wanted to destroy me. She had wanted to destroy herself. But fate had different plans. And now I was part of them. I died as myself. Will I live as her? I waited for him in the room with the mirror. The soft glow pulsed faintly in the dim light, like the thing was breathing. Alive. Watching. Waiting. I sat in the armchair across from it, hands clenched in my lap. The final shard had begun to form in the reflection. I could feel it, like a thorn growing under my ribs. Evan entered quietly. He didn't say anything, just stood by the doorway, as if stepping further would change everything. I need to tell you the truth, I said. He didn't move, but he stayed. That was enough. I told him everything, not in dramatic gasping bursts, just quiet truth, laid bare between us like a body on a slab. I told him about the morning I woke up in Sophia's bed. How I looked in the mirror and saw the face of the woman who had destroyed me. How the mirror from my childhood began reappearing in my dreams, each night giving me back another fragment of what really happened. I told him who I had been before all this, Dawson, a journalist, the woman he used to love. I told him how I died, how I was reborn, Not in some grand magical way, but trapped in the life of the person I hated most. And how I began to understand her. How I began to forgive her. How I fell for him all over again. Against all logic, against all fear. Evan didn't interrupt. He didn't even blink. He just stood there, breathing shallowly, as if the weight of every word was physically pressing against his chest. When I finally stopped speaking, silence stretched like wire between us. I stood up slowly, legs trembling, and walked toward him. "I don't expect you to believe me," I said. "I don't even know if I'd believe me. But you deserve the truth." He stared at me for one long, unreadable moment. Then he turned around and walked away. No words, no questions, just the soft click of the door closing behind him. The mirror didn't react. It just sat there, glowing gently, as if mocking me. I lost it. I picked up the nearest object, a heavy glass vase, and hurled it at the mirror with all the rage I'd buried inside me. It struck dead center. The mirror didn't shatter. The vase did. Glass exploded around me, shards scattering across the hardwood floor like broken thoughts. I sank to my knees, shaking. The mirror pulsed again. But the final shard remained dark. I left the house before dawn. The streets were still asleep. Even the city felt quieter, like it understood something had ended. I walked for blocks until my feet led me to a forgotten corner of the city, an old park that hadn't seen money in years. Rusted swings, cracked benches, a dry fountain filled with dead leaves. I sat alone beneath a tree. The silence pressed in, but I didn't resist it. I just let it hold me, until I heard footsteps, light, hesitant ones. "Lena." She sat beside me without asking. "I checked your room," she said softly. The mirror was glowing. I didn't respond. She glanced sideways at me. "So, it's true." I nodded. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I knew something was different. At first I thought maybe you'd finally snapped out of whatever spell our mother cast on you. But then, the way you laughed, the way you looked at Evan, the way you treated me, I knew. Or maybe I just hoped. I turned to her, throat tight. "One, you should hate me." "No," she said simply. "Because you're not her." Tears welled in my eyes. She reached over and took my hand. "And maybe," she added, "you're exactly who she wanted to be, deep down." Before the world taught her not to, I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. So I cried instead, and she held my hand the whole time. Everything moved quickly after that. Eloise was quietly removed from the board under suspicion of coercion and misappropriation. Not jail, not yet, but enough to ensure she'd never hold power again. Mira vanished. No announcement, no scandal. Just gone. The staff said she packed in the middle of the night and left without a word. I never saw her again. And Lena? She opened a foundation. The SVK Fund for Women in Crisis. She didn't name it after herself. She named it after her sister. Because maybe that was the part of Sophia that deserved to live on. The part that wanted to fix what had been broken. I returned to the room with the mirror one final time. The last shard was glowing now. The reflection shimmered, like a pond just before it breaks into ripples. And there I was. Not Sophia, not Jay. Just me, someone new, someone whole. "I forgive you," I whispered. Whether it was to Sophia, to myself, or to the life I had lost, I wasn't sure. But I meant it. I didn't know if Evan would ever come back. He had every right to walk away. From her, from me, from everything. But that wasn't the point anymore. I hadn't told him to win him back. I told him because he deserved the truth. Because I did too. And sometimes, that's the only kind of freedom that matters. Not the kind that saves you. The kind that lets you choose who you'll be next. The mirror didn't lie. I just never looked deep enough. I thought I was alone. The mirror glowed softly in the quiet of the room, its surface smooth and whole now. No cracks, no flickers of pain. It just was. Still and waiting. And then I felt it. A shift in the air. I turned. Evan stood in the doorway. No words, no coat, no armor, just him. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then he stepped inside, his gaze landing on the mirror. And staying there. "I saw it glowing," he said quietly. I nodded. "It does that." He didn't ask how. He didn't ask why. He just walked to it and looked. I watched his expression change. He didn't flinch, didn't gasp, just stared. And I knew, somehow, he wasn't seeing Sophia. He was seeing me, us, not as we were, as we could have been, as we might still be. I don't understand any of this, he said finally. His voice was rough around the edges, like it had been dragged through too much silence. Not fully. I don't expect you to. He turned to me. His eyes searched mine. I don't know who you are. I swallowed. I'm not her. And I'm not who I used to be either. He took a step closer. But you remember everything. Yes. Everything we had? Yes. And everything she did? I nodded. All of it. He didn't move. But he didn't look away either. And then, softly, he said, You're not her. I know. He exhaled slowly. And then said something I didn't expect. I don't know who you are, he said again. But with you, I can be someone I never got to be with her. We buried the past together. Not literally. There was no grave for Sophia, no marker for Jay. But we went to the lake from my dreams. The one where he once told me he loved me. The one where the dock broke and I drowned in memory. We stood side by side, wind tugging at our clothes, silence full of everything we didn't say. I tossed a white lily into the water. He tossed another. Do you think she ever loved you? I asked quietly. Evan was silent for a moment. Then, I think she wanted to. I think she didn't know how. I nodded. I think so too. We watched the flowers drift until they were nothing but white specks against the blue, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt peace. Not perfect, not permanent, but real. I didn't go back to being Jay. That door was closed. And I didn't try to be Sophia either. That mask had cracked too deeply. With Lena. With the truth. With the silence that wasn't hollow anymore. With Evan. We didn't call it love, not yet. Some days it was too heavy. Some days it felt too soon. But we were learning how to be honest. How to begin. How to stay. And sometimes I stood in front of the mirror. Just stood. Not asking questions. Not waiting for magic. Just being. The reflection didn't lie. It never had. I just never looked deep enough to see it. Maybe I was reborn as punishment. But I stayed for love.